The scariest horror video games of all time. Now, if you've never seen a Gamerant article, there's something else. Okay, oh my god. Spoiler alert. They got Doki Doki on here. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so we can all we can all have the displeasure of reading this together. All right, let's get into this. It looks like there's 16 entries. The scariest games of all time, according to Gamerant. Of all time, guys. Are you ready? Oh. Oh, boo, boo, boo. Boo. Bow to her! Bow to her! The queen of slime! The queen of refuse! Boo! Boo! Doki Doki Literature Club. I think I am like the #1 DDLC hater. Here's the thing about Doki Doki, and I feel like I've just gone on record about this too many times. So if you don't know, the whole premise of Doki Doki Literature Club is that it's like a harem dating simulator. Well, it starts off that way for the initial 3 hours or so that you're playing. And then you see like little hints here and there that like something is kind of wrong. There's like little like there's like a little glitchy thing that happens, or one of the characters will say something that's like a little off. They're like, what did they mean by that? That was a little strange. And then it turns out that it's like, it's secretly a horror game. The problem with it is, one of the problems is that as soon as you know that it's a horror game going in, which a lot of people did, and I did, it kind of ruins the surprise and it ruins the whole effect. And then before you know it, you're like playing through like 2 hours, 3 hours of harem dating simulator. And it's just straight up like one of those games at that point. You know, you're choosing which girl you want to write poems for or whatever. You know, it's been a long time since I've played it, but you have to go through it for so long that by the time the horror hits, you know, you're like, well, I've been waiting for this for so long. It's kind of rendered ineffective a little bit. And I think that the bait and switch that it provides, one of my friends pointed this out actually years ago, and I was like, that's a really good point. I think the bait and switch that it provides is done better in the first Danganronpa game. The first trial of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is, I mean, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it kind of has a similar dynamic to Doki Doki Literature Club. And I think that especially after playing that, it's like it felt like I'd already played it. And also, I think that there's possibly no video game genre that I'm more adverse to than like a harem dating simulator. And you just have to play too much of it. You have to write too many poems or read too many poems. You have to listen to too much of the girls being like, you know, telling you about like their problems and stuff. It's just, I think it gets to the meta horror aspect really late. And one thing that you don't want to do with horror games is have them drag on for too long. Like a lot of my least favorite horror games, they overstay their welcome. They go on for like 1 hour too long, 2 hours too long, sometimes even more than that. And Doki Doki took me, I think, between 5 and 6 hours to complete, maybe 4 and 5. And it's just a very long experience for what it has to offer. And I think when it comes to meta horror as well, I'm Scared 2016 is just like the ultimate experience for that. You know, when it comes to like changing files on your computer and doing stuff like that. I would say also Undertale has a much better execution for meta horror. Everything with Flowey. Yeah, Undertale did that magnificently. Pony Island did that pretty well. I'm not big on Pony Island, but I just feel like there were so many games that did meta horror better, but they didn't have cute anime girls. So they didn't achieve the popularity that Doki Doki Literature Club did. Now, that obviously that's excluding Undertale, which was popular outside of the meta horror aspect, and that's why it was able to, you know, do so well, because it brought other things to the table. But yeah, I just feel like DDLC is super overrated, and like the idea that it's the top 16, it kind of tilts me. Breaking the fourth wall to horrifying results. I feel like if you're really high on Doki Doki, it means that you didn't play I'm Scared or Pony Island or some of those games that I think did meta horror better. It's kind of, Doki Doki was one of those games that kind of hit the mainstream really quickly, and I feel like mainstream gamers played it and it like blew their minds, and they were like, this is the most unique horror game ever made. But like, if you're in the trenches and you're playing a lot of indie horror and you've played a lot of similar games, then if you played Doki Doki, I just feel like there's not as much for you. So those are my thoughts on DDLC. With that said, props to Dan Salvato and his team for making the game. I think it is interesting, and I don't think that it's entirely redundant or anything. I just feel like it got really, really popular, and it shouldn't have. But that's my opinion. All right. Are we even going to talk about it? Okay, yeah, they're going to talk about it. It's unnerving. Doki Doki is nowadays so well known that most new players will already know the twist, which can hurt the game's overall impact. Nevertheless, it is still quite scary. The game is not scary. That's another thing. It's not scary. Again, what's scary is subjective, but I think it's disturbing. I think it's unnerving. Scary? Agree, disagree. Number 15, Darkwood. Now, I actually haven't completed Darkwood, but I have played it. Excellent atmosphere. I think 15 is kind of crazy, but I haven't finished it. Much to Darkwood lovers' chagrin, because I get asked to play Darkwood. I get asked to finish Darkwood pretty much constantly. So, Darkwood is blacklisted in stream chat. So, sorry. Yeah, okay, we did ban the word Darkwood. So, if you want to talk about the game, you're just going to have to abbreviate it. Sorry. Yes. It's because you guys got to understand, the Darkwood fans, even though I uploaded a video on it and I said I'm not going to post a series on this game, but I'm glad I checked it out. Even though I said that, we for a while had people coming in like literally every stream being like, when are you going to finish Darkwood? And I'm like, so we just blacklisted the word. It's like Chucky. We blacklisted the word Chucky because when I was playing DBD, people would come in and be like, oh, you think Chucky's going to be a killer? And we just got tired of it. Anyway, but, I'm not going to pick at this one too much. If they want to put it 15, sure. I'm sure Darkwood fans will be happy. But I just feel like, is it really 15? We'll see. All right, what we got? Little Nightmares at 14. I like Little Nightmares, but that's very high if we're talking top all time. Now, hang on. Is this best horror games of all time, or is this scariest games of all time? The scariest horror games of all time. The fact that we've got Doki Doki and Little Nightmares on this list is incredible to me. Little Nightmares is a very competently made game. It's very fun. It's the type of game that I've played multiple times. I've done a replay of Little Nightmares and the DLC. I liked it. I think the atmosphere is really good. Soundtrack, just like the gameplay is really smooth. It's a excellently designed game. I love all the monsters, including the cooks here. I think the scene where you're running from all the ones on the ship trying to eat you is like thrilling. But yeah, 14 is kind of crazy, not gonna lie. Alan Wake 2 at number 13. Okay, they're cooking with this one. Okay, they're cooking. I wasn't expecting that. Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2, by the way, vastly superior game to the first one. I think that's a pretty universal opinion. That shouldn't be controversial. Yeah, Alan Wake 2, very, very good game. One of the most memorable sequences I've ever experienced in a game. If you haven't played it, I won't spoil it for you. But it occurs around the 1/3 mark. It depends, because the game isn't exactly linear. So you could experience it way later in the game. But it's one of those things like when it happens, you'll know. And again, I don't want to spoil it, but there is something in the game that I haven't seen in any other game. And it put a smile on my face, which is odd for a horror game to do that. It put a smile on my face for like the whole time. So yeah, the whole time, the whole night, I should say, after I was done playing. But yeah, Alan Wake 2, I can't disagree with that. Very good. Alien Isolation, okay, sure. I have noticed over time that I am not as high on Alien Isolation as a lot of other people are. I think Alien Isolation is a very good game. However, I do think it is too long. And I do think that the gameplay changes a lot when you get the flamethrower and you're able to defend yourself and ward off the alien. And it changes for the worse. With that said, you know, the atmosphere is incredible. The alien has a great AI, at least. And again, this might just be a me thing. On standard difficulty, I tried playing the game on higher difficulty, and the AI was so ruthless that it didn't come across to me as like intelligent. It kind of ruined the game a little bit because like the alien is just overactive on higher difficulties. She's just constantly like going up in the vents, coming down, going up, coming down, going up, coming down. She hears anything, she's down there. And it's like the AI, I don't even want to say it's too smart. I want to say the AI is just, it's too oppressive in higher difficulties. But, you know, if you're a speedrunner on the game, you might disagree. You know all the strats and stuff. But just as like a casual player, you know, I got through it on hard or whatever. I didn't play on Nightmare. But it did kind of... I would say I had a much worse experience with the game on hard than I did on normal difficulty on standard. So I think Alien Isolation is a very good game. And it was especially incredible to play at the time that it came out. But I am less high on it than others. But still, I can't argue. 12, that makes sense. You know, 12, if we're talking scariest ever, 12, sure. 11, PT. Now, some people are weird about this. They're like, PT's not even a game, it's a demo. PT stands for playable teaser. Trust me, because I have gone on record in saying that PT might be my scariest game of all time. And... yeah, I think I had like a horror game tier list video where I think I put PT in S tier, and I had a lot of, you know, the usual types, you know, the types that anything released after the PS2 is garbage. They were just like, PT stands for playable teaser, not even a game, blah, blah, blah. First person, blah, blah. You know, they lose their minds over anything with first person in it. But I think PT... you know, I'd love to replay it and see how it stacks up today, but it might be the scariest game I've ever played. And part of the fact is that it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's, you know, less than an hour long. It is repetitive, but not too much. There's enough random scares and stuff. It's not overly reliant on jump scares either. There are some jump scares, but it's primarily atmosphere, and it changes things up. It's paced really well. You know, it baits you in with things feeling normal one moment, and then something crazy happens. I have a very good memory of like playing PT, and then ending things. You know, it doesn't hit the same now, but ending on the trailer for Silent Hills. You know, the fact that they uploaded this and nobody knew what it was. It was under a, you know, false studio game looking like a random indie horror game, and they didn't, you know, people cracked it really fast what to do, and all a thing at the end like answering the phone, then walking backwards, or listen for the baby giggle, or I can't remember exactly what you have to do to make the trailer unlock. But PT is an amazing game, and I would say if we're just talking scariest games, like the title suggests, 11 is too low. But yeah, no, I can't say enough things about PT. It's 10 years old. Oh, I still got my PS4 with PT installed on it. They'll never take it away from me. Okay, I obviously disagree with this. Visage over PT? No way. No way. In no universe is Visage better than PT. I disliked playing, I think, the second release of Visage so much that I never played the final release. It's like a PT that's overly derivative of PT. But it overstays its welcome completely. It drags on for too long. There's too many sequences where you gotta like wait for something to happen. It's just kind of, it's like they blew out the PT demo to like a full game, but it doesn't work because it didn't add enough to it. I'm kind of a Visage hater a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily a bad experience, but I did not enjoy it, and I disenjoyed it enough to not complete it. So in that respect, I'm kind of shocked to see it not only above PT, but also above Alien Isolation. I think that is a travesty. I'll say it. A travesty. 9, Resident Evil Remake, okay. I mean, I would put it higher, but the fact that it's on here, happy. And, you know, Remake is a legitimately scary game. Scarier than Alien Isolation. I don't know about that. But it is a very good game. I would have Resident Evil Remake ranked very highly if we were just talking about like best horror games. I would be like, it needs to be top 5. As far as if we're talking scariest though, I think 9's fair-ish. I could nitpick it, like I put it higher or lower depending on what games are around it. But I'm not going to argue with it. The Evil Within 2. Now, The Evil Within 2, I'm high on Evil Within 2. I think it's better than the first one. A lot of people disagree with me on that. That's okay. As far as scariest games go, I would put this in the teens. Like we're putting this over. We're putting this over some games that are like flat out better than it. So yeah, too high. I think that Evil Within 2 is, it's less scary than the first one, I think, from what I remember anyway. I really like Evil Within 2 though. I think it should have been embraced harder by the players, but yeah, this is too high. Definitely too high. Too bad we'll never see Evil Within 3. Dead Space. Dead Space is pretty scary in like a jump scare atmosphere type of way. Dead Space Remake, replaying through that, you know, basically replaying the original was an incredible experience. Yeah, I think towards the end of Dead Space you get kind of desensitized from all the action and all the grunting and all the blood and viscera and all the shrieking and stuff. I do think towards the end it gets a little numbing. So in that respect, it kind of loses the fear towards the end. So I'd put it lower than some of the ones that it has in like the teens and stuff. But I do have respect for Dead Space. Hang on one second. I'm asking, or Kimmy asked me if I wanted dinner, and I'm saying yes. Outlast, number 6. You know, I played Outlast I replayed Outlast a few years ago. I played it when it came out. And when it came out, it was absolutely one of the scariest games ever. I will say replaying it in 2021 is when I did it. I think it's been done better since, including by Alien Isolation, honestly. I think that Outlast is good. Okay, hang on. I think it's a good game, but I do think that it's been leapfrogged since it came out. Especially if we're just talking scary games. I think if you play Outlast now, it won't hit the same because horror games are scarier now than they were when this came out. When this came out, 2012, 2013? 13, yeah. November 2013. I remember this came out around the same time, I think a week before Amnesia Machine for Pigs. long-awaited sequel that most of us were disappointed by. But yeah, I think Outlast too high here, actually. Hang on one second, sorry. Okay. All right, let's keep going. I think if you're not seeing the trend so far, I think that PT and Alien Isolation should be way higher. Alan Wake 2 is an incredible game, but as far as scary goes, it's not really that scary. So I don't necessarily disagree with it being 13. Ooh, RE7 5. Okay. I do think that Resident Evil 7 I would say is the scariest Resident Evil. That's contentious. A lot of classic Resident Evil fans, they shit on the first person camera angle. They act like it's you know, they act like it does nothing for them and it has to be fixed camera angle or bust, but you're never going to please those people, frankly. So I think Resident Evil 7 is the scariest Resident Evil game, and I don't think it's particularly close either. Now, as far as like gameplay goes, I do prefer Resident Evil 4, and I think RE Remake in some respects is a better game than Resident Evil 7. But I think as far as like just pure scary game, I think 7's the scariest. So that's my stance with that. So I don't disagree with this being a top 5. We'll see what's ahead of it though, you know. Fatal Frame 2. I actually haven't played Fatal Frame 2. I own a copy of it. I did play Fatal Frame 1, and I wasn't, like, amazed by it. But 2, I've always heard, is, like, the definitive Fatal Frame experience. As always with horror games, though, that differs from first into person. Some people are like, no, it's 3, you know. 2's overrated. But Fatal Frame 2 is always the one that I hear about. It's kind of like, you know, it's the Silent Hill 2 of that series, from what I understand. It's the one that everybody is like, if you're going to play one, you play this one. So at some point I'll play it. But yeah. So I can't really say anything about this like, oh, no way, or, you know, it's one of those Spirit camera games. It was, you know, one of the first ones to do it, the first Fatal Frame anyway. So, yeah, I'd like to check that out at some point. 2003, wow. Whew. Silent Hill 2, number 3. And, of course, they put a picture of the remake here. There we go. There's the original. That's more like it. Silent Hill 2, number 3. I think if we're going scariest, by today's standards, I'm not sure that Silent Hill 2 is necessarily scary. It's a great game, obviously. It's one of the best horror games ever. Some might say the best horror game ever. Some would put it, you know, top 50 all time just in general. But I don't know if I can be like, oh, it's not scary. 3 is too high either. Because it's Silent Hill 2. You know, you got to respect it. So I'll leave Silent Hill 2 alone here out of respect. I won't nitpick it. Until Dawn. I'm an Until Dawn lover, but number 2 scariest of all time. You're saying this is scarier than PT, scarier than Alien Isolation, scarier than Outlast. I mean, number 2? I wouldn't say that Until Dawn is even... It's hard because I'm trying to put my mind and like I'm trying to get into the mindset of someone who doesn't play horror games all the time and hasn't played like a million of them. I don't even think that Until Dawn is considered... I don't think I would even consider it scary for someone who's not really into the genre that much. No, this is baffling. Number 2? That's too high. That's for sure. I mean, it's more of like, I mean, it's a slasher at its core. And here's my hot take. I really just don't think that slashers are that scary. And that includes the movies. I think if you're talking about like a scary movie, I think this is more, slashers are like the action movies of the horror genre. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're not horror or anything. They are. But scary? Nah, I don't think so. I mean, slashers are more like fun. I would say Until Dawn's a very fun game. If we're talking about like most fun horror games, I still think 2 is too high, but I would put it in the top 5, honestly. Most fun horror games, I can see that. 2, though, for scariest, no. All right, what are they going to have for number 1? We haven't seen Amnesia: The Dark Descent. And the thing is, I wouldn't put Amnesia at number 1. As someone who has played it pretty recently, I don't think it has aged particularly well. What's going to be number 1? I wonder. Yeah, Breath of the Wild. Yeah, that's a scary game. Okay, let's find out. It's Amnesia. Okay. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, when it came out in 2010? Does it have the 2010? Yeah, September 2010. I played it in 2011, and when I played it in 2011, I was like, this is the scariest game of all time. Because it was. I think it was the scariest game of all time in 2011 or 2010. When it came out, there was nothing that had been done like it. It brought horror into first person. It jump-started the indie horror genre, arguably as a whole. I mean, 14 years ago, I was playing indie horror games in 2011, and if you wanted to play indie horror games in 2011, you basically had to play Amnesia mods. I talked about this in a recent Elden Ring video, actually, because there was no scene. It's like, I remember in 2011, there was like, I mean, there were some games like Eerie was a game that might have been 2012, actually. That's around the time that indie horror games started getting popularized. But until then, like, you had to do mods. Like, I remember Nightmare House 2 and Nightmare House were mods for Half-Life that you could play, and they were pretty good. Cry of Fear was a Half-Life mod. If you wanted to play indie horror games, there were mods for Amnesia or for Half-Life or whatever else. And there wasn't a scene. So at the time, Amnesia: The Dark Descent was absolutely the scariest game of all time. But now, it's kind of my similar opinion to what I have on Outlast. When it released, it was the scariest, but it's been done so many times since then, and better, frankly. I think this is a contentious opinion, but on the subject of Outlast, I think Outlast 2, like the first third of Outlast 2, is scarier than the entire first Outlast game. The second 2/3 of Outlast 2 are what kind of ruin it for me. But as far as just fear goes, that's kind of what the power of the more modern horror game. And I think that Amnesia was the king, but I replayed it, I think, as recently as 2021. I was going through like a replay era that year. I replayed Outlast, Alien Isolation, and Amnesia that year. I would say it's still a good game, very well designed, but the fear isn't there anymore. Just because once you've played some of the more modern games that have been more intense, more atmospheric, more unpredictable than Amnesia, it just doesn't hit the same. And I say this with full respect to Amnesia, because it was the king and it deserves respect, but it is not the scariest anymore. Like I said, my personal pick is the PT demo, and I haven't replayed that recently, so my opinion might change if I replay it. But I think PT is the scariest game of all time. And then I would even say Resident Evil 7 is pretty close to the scariest game of all time now. I'm trying to think of one that I would put ahead of it. I think, honestly, in terms of, like, scariest games I've played recently, there's some weird ones that I'm not sure would be, like, universal picks. Like, I thought the Complex found footage was like a very visceral liminal spaces experience, but some people are going to play that game and be like, this does nothing for me. But it's like certain people can play certain games. Like, I played that game and I was like mesmerized. I was just like, how did they do this? This is incredible. Yeah, if you want to see me play Complex Found Footage, by the way, you can watch it in my 14 Random Backrooms Games video. It's on there somewhere. Some people played, I'll go ahead and go full screen, the game Anatomy from Kitty Horror Show. Some people play that, and it's like, they would say that's the scariest game of all time. I would say Anatomy by Kitty Horror Show is comparable to what's that movie, Skinamarink. Whereas, like, some people are gonna play that or watch that and be like, huh? What is this? And other people are gonna play or watch that and be like, this is hitting me to my core, And so I think scariest game ever is always gonna be very subjective. And I think the scariest game for you personally is always going to be some weird little game like that. If you can get into the genre enough to find something like that you're like, this is it. This really gets to me. And I think that the list being full of mainstream titles here is trying to make more of a mainstream pick, more universally regarded pick for scariest horror game. But it's just one of those things that I don't think is going to be universally agreed upon. Like I said, mine is PT, my pick is PT, but some people out there are like, PT did nothing for me. So I think more than any other game genre, horror games are subjective as hell. Definitely. Oh, Soma. Honestly, Soma, I think Soma might... I've already said that Soma is Frictional's best game in the past, and I've been holding that opinion for maybe 7 years now. Soma is their best game. It's better than Amnesia: The Dark Descent. It's better than certainly better than Machine for Pigs, although Frictional didn't do that game. Better than any of the Penumbra games. Better than Amnesia: The Bunker. Soma's amazing. But I'd even go a step further and say Soma might be their scariest game, just psychologically. Yeah, whenever I think of Soma, I'm like, that's their best game. But thinking about it like it's their scariest game, I think it's their scariest game too. And the fact that it's not on the list, but Doki Doki Literature Club is. But again, I think the fear in Soma, without giving too much of it away if you haven't played it, comes from, like, if you have underwater fear, it's going to get you because you go through the abyss at one point, and it's got an incredible depiction of the abyss. If, like, the psychological horror of, like, your consciousness jumping or, kind of consciousness self-sabotage, I don't know how else to say it, is freaky to you, then it's an incredibly scary game. The ending is, like, dark as hell. Yeah, it's just Soma might be Soma's top 5 for me if we're talking scariest now that I think about it. And I'd love to replay that game. I think the ideal way to play Soma is to play it with the setting that they released, I think officially, of no monsters. You can turn the monsters off. Didn't they release that update? Because that was one complaint I had when I played through it when it came out, is I was like, I'm loving the atmosphere, I'm loving the story. The monsters feel tacked on. And I think you can turn them off officially. I know there was a mod for a long time that allowed you to turn it off, but I think you can turn them off officially now. If you haven't played Soma, I would say turn the monsters off and just go for it. If you have to install a mod, then install a mod. But Yeah, Soma, amazing game. I think as more time passes, it's held in higher and higher regard. But yeah, I think my top 5. I'm not going to do a top 16. If I were to pick top 5 scariest games, for me personally, I would say PT, Soma, Resident Evil 7, and these are in no particular order after PT. I might put Alien Isolation in there, honestly. I had to stress quit that game many times when I first played it. I don't know what number 5 would be or what my 5th game would be. Yeah, I said no particular order after PT. I don't know. Still Wakes the Deep? Yeah, Still Wakes the Deep I think should be on this list. That's I mean, Gamerant is kind of a joke, but you know, full disrespect intended. I'm being kind of mean. But the fact, I'm sorry, but this update here cracks me up. I mean, I know it was made in April, but the fact that they list like Bendy's Secrets of the Machine here and not Still Wakes the Deep. I know that they would have to do Still Wakes the Deep wasn't out at the time, but yeah. By the way, none of those games I would put on this list. Alone in the Dark, the new Alone in the Dark game was fun at the end, at least. But you know, I think honestly, I think that some of the scariest sequences that I've played in games have been. I'm trying to think. Have been in games that are non-horror, that have like horror elements. I don't know. Honestly, my mind is so like blasted by thinking about different games now that I can't think of an example. Of course, it's just a feeling that I have. But yeah. Anyway, so what y'all think of that list? Crap. Yeah, I you know what? I haven't played Thief 3, but I've heard about the Cradle. Yeah, people have been recommending that to me for years. Yeah, it could have been better, but it's Gamerant. That's kind of how I feel too. I think the most egregious additions here are Doki Doki, Little Nightmares. Again, I love Little Nightmares, but scary. Visage is like Visage being above PT. Like, give me a break. And then Evil Within 2 is like a real head scratcher there. And there's some I would shuffle around a lot more than others. Until Dawn, I think, is the weirdest one. Number 2. That's way off. But yeah, interesting list. I'm glad I checked it out.